So there's a lot of people subleasing now.
Yes.
What do you think about this?
I think people should be careful.
I'm often scared that I'm encouraging people to come into the market.
You could very easily be losing money.
What was COVID like? You had 130 apartments.
That hit property operators very hard.
Today on the podcast, I got Walid Shihabi. He's been running an Airbnb business in Dubai since 2013. So he's a true veteran in the Airbnb space here in Dubai. Thank you so much for coming.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So obviously Dubai was a very different place in 2013 compared to now. So how was it starting an Airbnb business in Dubai in 2013?
Well, it was, I was discovering as I go, it wasn't really an established business. You obviously already had a tourism business in Dubai. Dubai has been a destination, recognized destination for a couple of decades now. So in general, the hotel business, the hospitality, the tourism and the business tourism and so on existed. But 2013, even Airbnb was a relatively novel concept and idea. I think really people started recognizing it 2012, 2013 as a provider of alternative.
When did Airbnb start? Was it in 2010 or something like that?
I think 2010. I think you're right. But for it to have gotten, past the its small US startup, scale, probably 2011 and 12 was where more and more people started hearing about it. They weren't the only provider, interestingly enough, of that service. There were businesses that predated Airbnb. Businesses like VRBO or HomeAway that was
Booking?
Strong in Europe. And Booking sort of was dabbling in the space, but not really there. You even had TripAdvisor actually at some point attempting a presence in that space. And I think you'll find this very interesting. When we started in 2013, after I built the original business plan based on the fact that by my numbers, there was a shortage of hotel rooms in Dubai. So you have a very high occupancy rates. So really demand for alternative accommodation was there. And property was available, and amazing property in great locations was available as an alternative if you set it up properly and you marketed it on the right platforms. But around 6 months to a year into me starting the business with a handful of properties, you'll find it very interesting that 50% of my bookings were coming from Airbnb and 50% were coming from this platform called HomeAway.
Oh, HomeAway. Nobody uses that today.
Nobody uses that these days. I believe that whole platform, VRBO, HomeAway, got acquired by I'm going to say Expedia, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody could correct me later on, but I believe it was acquired by Expedia 8 years ago, and then they reshifted the focus, etc. So gradually, the bookings I was getting from HomeAway, diminished down to pretty much zero today.
So 2013, was the Burj Khalifa even built then?
Yes, yeah. Burj Khalifa was up and running back in 2009, I believe, and so it was there for a while. Dubai was already quite an established destination, like I said. Some key attractions, key landmarks.
What was the key areas? Was it still the marina?
Marina was top, definitely. You're talking about seafront, beachfront, easy access to the beach. JBR was up and running. So there was a lot of life there. And tourism to Dubai was always to a large degree led by the sort of the beachfront
But was it
attraction.
anything compared to what it is today?
Well, in terms of actual volume, I mean, the hotels you already had. I mean, the Jumeirah Beach, the Palm, these hotel and resort hotels were already up and running over there. But we also always had in parallel a very strong sort of business visitor market to Dubai. Dubai was very well established since the early 2000s as the regional hub for business. It was also very well established as a travel hub, meaning people used to sort of transit through Dubai and stay for a couple of days, 2, 3, 4 days in transit to somewhere else. And that was always the case since the early 2000s. And in terms of exhibitions, back then, we also had a very strong strong exhibitions market from way back.
Exhibitions meaning like events and stuff like
Events and exhibitions, absolutely. You already had the region's largest technology exhibition in GITEX. GITEX was already up and running. Cityscape, other major sort of marquee events were happening in Dubai back then. So not very different from what it is today. Only it's grown significantly, of course, in the last 10 years in terms of the volume, in terms of the attractions, and in terms of the infrastructure.
Oh. So tell me, how many units? So obviously we were doing it. We have a different Airbnb business. I'm subleasing, meaning I rent apartments from landlords, just long term, put them on Airbnb and book.com and make a profit there between.
Correct.
You mostly, if I'm not mistaken, you do the revenue share model.
Correct. Entirely.
Where you manage apartments for owners,
Yes.
and you take 20%, something like that, and you give them 80% of the revenue. How did you grow? Initially, how many apartments did you have? How many apartments do you have now? What's that like?
So we had a relatively unconventional story if you compare it to more of the Airbnb management businesses you see today, or the holiday home management businesses that you see today. We started. I come from a finance background, so I started actually first by raising a real estate fund, which means I raised money and then bought properties. So rather than renting properties or managing properties, we bought the properties ourselves using investor funds. And the idea over there is that we acquire good, high-quality prime properties. It was almost entirely in Dubai Marina, but also included the IFC, which we included because we always believed in it being the financial hub of the Middle East. And we acquired those properties and then converted them to holiday homes. So we furnished them, we set them up for rentals, and then created an operating company called Hometown to manage the properties that the fund that I established owned. And we built the whole concept on these properties. And then from there, once the whole industry of Airbnb management got licensed, that was 2 years later in 2015, then Hometown started managing not just the properties of the fund, but third-party properties, also based on the management contract basis. So the fund had at its peak around 32 properties, 32 residential properties, 1 and 2 bedrooms, all of them.
So those are apartments you bought using other people's
using a real estate fund,
Okay.
And the idea of the fund, of course, was to make money on the properties, but to make also a higher return than you would just buying the property and leasing out in a standard fashion. And the numbers back then were actually extremely compelling. So the study that we did on our own properties, which means that the results were verified by our own properties. And the results were that we were able to efficiently, for the period, let's say, between 2013, 14, and into 15, generate gross, which means before expenses, around more than twice the income of a long-term lease. Yes.
And today, for everybody thinking about it, it's like maybe 15 or 20% more.
Maximum. Maximum. But that's what happens. Once you discover that outsized returns exist, a lot of other players come in, a lot of new inventory comes in. Back then, we were one of maybe 3 operators in all of Dubai.
That's
and
crazy.
Remember, I'm talking about a period where this wasn't a licensed business. So you could only really effectively do it for your own stock. As self-managed, if you like, prior to 2015, or do it in the gray manner that people did back then.
And then you transitioned over to managing apartments for other people for a commission.
And that's after we had 2 years of experience doing
your own units.
Yes.
And what was the most apartments you had? What was the biggest?
Pre-COVID, we had reached 130 properties under
130
third-party properties under management.
And what happened during COVID? You're the first guy that I've interviewed that has done Airbnb in Dubai before COVID, because 95% of holiday home companies started after COVID.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe even more. Or maybe 95.
I don't know the figure exactly, but certainly it's mushroomed in 2021 onwards.
So I'm super excited to hear, what was COVID like? You had 130 apartments and then
Correct.
COVID.
Yes.
What happened? How did you survive
So
through
a
that?
little bit of background before that. So there's a gap, if you like, between 2015 and 2020, where COVID hit, where we were obviously growing the inventory, growing the portfolio that we were managing under Hometown, having good success on the platforms. Booking came in also, and we added properties there. But something started to happen in that these outsized returns that we were generating started going down. During that period. So we weren't no longer able to generate maybe 60, 70% higher than net to the owners, higher than what the market was making, because number one, a lot of new inventory in Dubai started coming in. And ever since it became a licensed business, we were no longer the only game in town. So a lot of other players started coming into the market. And that, increase in supplies brought down the average returns until in 2019 in particular. And these were also, from an economic point of view, also soft years, if you like. So the growth in visitor numbers, etc., was no longer as high as what we were witnessing 2013, 14. It had tailed off a little bit. So occupancy rates came down a little bit, and ADRs, or average daily room rates, started coming down. So the appeal of short-term rentals started reducing as compared to the market overall. But obviously the big hit happened in 2020 when effectively travel shut down, tourism shut down, and it happened very quickly.
How many months was it where there was no tourism, complete shutdown?
So we felt things starting to cool off in March in Dubai is high season, right? You're supposed to have occupancy north of 80% in your properties, but as COVID started to become a thing in end of February, beginning of March, we started to see a tail off in occupancy, and then within a week of March starting, it practically shut down. If you remember, it escalated very quickly. And what ended up happening is we had around a 60% cancellation rate at the beginning of March. And Airbnb, if people were actually operating at that time, Airbnb guaranteed the bookers a full refund. Yeah. And that hit property operators and property owners very hard. These were bookings that you prepared for. These are cash flows that you expect to come in order to cover your expenses. You're operating. You have staff that clean properties. You have staff that deal with tenants.
You have to pay.
Your costs are not variable to a large degree. They are staff. They are marketing costs. There is all sorts, and they would refund the guests even if your refund policy did not accommodate for.
That's crazy.
For that. So our revenues between March and April of 2020 dropped by north of 80%. And really by April, the only people occupying our properties were people still stuck in Dubai who can't go back home.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. But Dubai was kind of lenient, they didn't shut down that much, did they?
That's a misconception.
Okay.
It was lenient the second stage of COVID. The first stage was as strong and harsh as anywhere else in the world. We were barely allowed out of our houses to get groceries for almost a 2-month period.
Okay.
So no, the shutdown was complete. Travel was completely shut down. Air travel was completely shut down for a period of, if I recall correctly, around a month or a month and a half. And obviously, hospitality businesses suffered massively from that. Hotels were able to shut down. So hotels literally shut down their operations over a period of time. Not all hotels, but definitely a significant component of hotels literally shut off the lights. And as a holiday home business, you may not necessarily have that luxury. You may not necessarily have that opportunity. And we were tracking things as they happened, but our conclusion at a certain point in time is we cannot survive operating at our level without any revenues. Remember, we make entirely our revenues as a percentage of bookings. So if bookings are zero, revenues are zero. You have to.
So what did you do? Did you get long-term tenants or?
So in terms of our own inventory, we had transitioned to long-term leases. But remember, a lot of people were leaving Dubai at that stage if they were able to leave, because a lot of people lost their jobs. Economic pillars in Dubai are what? Are travel and tourism, our hotels and real estate, are, all these industries that populate events, etc. That really you have a lot of people working in them. All of a sudden found ourselves without work, and you can only sustain so long without actually work opportunities. So even the long-term rental market took a big dip, around 30%, I would say, in terms of pre-COVID rental levels versus post. But short-term rentals, 90% decline. So it would still make sense to put your properties onto long-term rents. And we dropped our headcount by around 60% over a two-stage approach, retained only key staff to service existing properties and make sure that the properties are taken care of and the transition is well handled. And we encouraged property owners actually that needed the income of their properties to pay mortgages or anything else, or actually needed some sort of income to come through from their properties. We encouraged them to take back their properties and put them on the long-term leasing.
Oh, so you didn't do it for them?
We helped, we sort of facilitated, but obviously we didn't generate any income from the process. So it was more just a caretaking exercise.
So how many units do you have now? And I hear you scaled back a little bit, or focusing more on quality units. What's your holiday home business like now?
Correct. Scale was more important pre-COVID than it is for us right now as Hometown. And the company today manages around 80 properties, but the focus became on only very specific quality, locations, type, even fit and finish levels, right? Where we would only manage, and that is for us an efficiency factor. The market is, as you said, different today. It has been flooded by inventory, if you like, or flooded by number of units that are on Airbnb. I think a number that is viable is somewhere between 30 and 40,000 units in Dubai alone.
Crazy.
Very, very high number of keys. And remember, these are not hotel rooms. These accommodate significantly more people per key or per unit.
Exactly.
Maybe on average, they're a 1 or a 2 bedroom unit, which for us, a 2 bedroom unit can accommodate 5 people.
Yeah, mine can usually sleep 8 people.
Okay, you can go up to that, of course. So effectively, you're talking about a big inventory that's available to the market, and it's managed in very, very variable ways. We chose, rather than to try to compete for market share in the case of Hometown, is to sort of scale down and focus on the most profitable part of that business and an area where we believe we can actually generate for the landlord the required utility or benefits from operating it as a holiday home, and that being first and foremost their ability to use the property when they need to, so for it to function as a second home and actually have that property generate an income for them, but be available for them at the time of need. And these tend to be higher end properties, beachfront properties, a little bit larger size than the pure investment property type. And secondly, to achieve a viable return on the property and to make sure that somebody in town, a lot of these properties are owned by non-residents. Like I said, they're second homes, so they use them only when they're in Dubai. Make sure that a company is taking full care of the condition of the property, from maintenance and upkeep point of view to servicing to the whole thing, including payment management for things such as service fees and utilities and so on.
Yeah. So there's a lot of people subleasing now.
Yes.
There's like a mania going on right now of
Correct.
everybody subleasing, like renting apartments, putting them on Airbnb and trying to make the difference. What do you think about this whole scene right now?
I think people should be careful. I think the spread isn't very large, and it will depend on you being able to do this at scale. It's not worth it if you're doing for 1 or 2 properties, right? It takes up too much of your own personal time, and the returns. If you calculate them, you could be doing better spending that time elsewhere. So you need to be at scale for this to make matter, right?
Yeah.
You need to be able to do that for 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 properties for it to make sense. And you are taking a risk. You have a fixed cost and a variable income. Okay, and when you have a fixed cost and a variable income, you could very easily be losing money if you account for everything that you need to account for, including your own time. Right? The time that it takes you to market these properties, to deal with guests, to hire people to help you do that, to deal with vendors, to clean and to do this and that, and then taking all the expenses into consideration, from the utilities to the consumables to so on, and then compare that to what you have as an absolutely fixed cost that you cannot break, which is called the annual rent that you owe. And then you have the consideration of cash flows. You pay rent up front, you receive booking income at time of booking. So you're always fronting the money and then getting the revenues later, rather than vice versa. So there's a cash flow management element to this. So when we started off Hometown, like I said, we started managing our own inventory and then started managing third-party inventory. But we also got into what we call the master lease function, where we rent the property for a year and then operate it for short-term rentals in order to generate what we call a delta or a profit on that operation.
So that's the same as subleasing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is exactly
So
the
you
same.
did some of that for a time.
For a period between 2015, forgive me, up until 2018 almost, and then we reversed them. And that was at the point where long-term leases were, and net profit from short-term leases were almost equivalent, so it didn't make sense.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that you said. Like me documenting my journey, I'm often scared that I'm like encouraging people to come into the market when they're maybe not ready, because to be profitable subleasing in Dubai, it's very hard. Yep. Because there isn't a lot of profit. No. And to make that profit, you have to be really, really good. And
really efficient,
yes.
Really efficient with your costs.
Exactly.
Really efficient with your occupancy, really efficient with your pricing, and really efficient with your operations.
You just have to do pretty much everything perfect.
Yes.
And I often tell people...
And people underestimate exactly what that means.
Absolutely.
You are running a hotel without a hotel lobby, without centralized functions, and you're trying to keep everybody involved happy. You're trying to time the cleaner. You're trying to do the laundry. You're trying to pay all the bills on time.
Of course, man. And people, like Airbnb has always been like presented for this, like everybody can do Airbnb. It's easy, it's user-friendly. But, yes, it is, but it's, if you want to be the best, it's not. It's a skill, just like everything else. Like if you want to be a trader, it's a lot of skill that you have to learn. It's the same with Airbnb. If you want to make that profit,
it's a skill and it's a commitment.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's a full-time job.
Skill isn't enough.
Yeah.
It's a commitment. You have to commit to a certain standard. If your response rate, and you want to keep your response rate at a certain level to improve the sort of profile of your listing, then you're answering at 5 a.m.
Yeah.
Right? So good luck with that. If you want to ensure that guest experience is standardized and that they review you well, and that improves your chances of getting a better booking schedule and higher rates on your property, that's a whole thing. That's customer experience, that's feedback capture, that is triggers, it is a business. Yeah. And the complexity, if you go from 2 properties to 10, the complexity multiplies by.
Exactly.
So
you can maybe manage 5 apartments on your own, but as soon as you go above that, you're going to need an assistant for the communication. You're going to need processes, systems, and
How do you know?
softwares.
Yeah, just simple things that how do you know that housekeeping went on time, prepared the property,
Exactly.
the property is up to standard, and that it's ready for the guest that's coming in, that's in the airport but not answering his phone, so you're not sure at what time they arrive at a reception that you don't have a control over, and how are they going to gain entry, and what are they going to say? One of the immediate findings that we had in terms of customer experience and the quality of a stay is that 50% of the quality of the stay is determined in the first 15 minutes. It's that extreme.
Yeah.
It is that extreme.
I definitely feel that, most of the bad reviews I get are one night stays because there's something that goes wrong and we don't have those extra days to make it up to them.
You do not have the extra days. You do not have the gap to, number one, identify what went wrong and try to address it and then try to make up for it.
Yeah.
And it's one of the trickiest parts of short-term rentals is the arrival experience, is the check-in experience. In hotels, you have a reception, you have a porter, you have somebody taking you to your room, you have instructions, you have guides. The whole infrastructure is centered around the guest. In a residential property, that's not the case.
Yeah.
The reception doesn't answer to you as an operator, right? It doesn't care, it doesn't know, it has certain just mainly sort of legal requirements, right? But it has no obligation to accommodate your guests. So you have to do it on their behalf. You have to guide the guest to the property. You have to ensure that somebody was available on time, or at least that the instructions were clear enough for them to get to the property without facing multiple impediments, including, nobody able to help them, they can't reach out to anybody. So that first experience, and then the entry into the property, that discovery of what I paid for, what I booked, what I'm betting on for this vacation that cost me X amount of money to go into this property, and then I find something wrong in there, that ruins my vacation.
Exactly. Yeah.
That ruins my vacation, and I'm going to take it out on you. I'm going to take it out on that review, and etc. And sometimes it's small things, and a lot of times, no, it's very legitimate things. Housekeeping did not make it on time, or they're in there already, or you're 3 hours late in handing over the property because the previous guest refused to leave on time. And you can't give them an alternative because no property is the same that you manage, right? So it's not like a hotel room where you have identical rooms that, if one is full, you chuck them into the other. In this case, this is the one they booked. Even if it's in the same building, has a slightly different view. No, they didn't book that. They booked unit 105 on the 10th floor of the following building.
Exactly.
Right? And to make up for that, you're going to have to either pay them back some money or give them more days, or you're going to struggle because of it. So that initial period of guest experience determines the majority of the stay.
Yeah, definitely. I always want to try to find every chance I get to talk about this as well, not only the positives. But, when people reach out to me, say they want to do subleasing in Dubai, I always say, look at your home country first, because Dubai is very competitive. And, if you can make it work and you're really good, then sure, you can do it in Dubai. But look at your home country first, because it's probably easier in your home country. Like, where I'm from in Iceland, it's not good for, making a big scale operations, but starting with 1, 2, or 3 units, you can make a bunch of mistakes and still be profitable. And I think that's the case in almost most countries. But in Dubai, you cannot make any mistakes. If you do make any mistakes or too many mistakes, you're just going to break even or even lose money.
It's too competitive. Rent is expensive, right? So what you're going to pay to start off with is expensive. You're going to make up for a lot of cost. Right there. So that's one of the things. And then number 2, scale is very, very, very challenging. Of course, companies that have scaled in exactly the same model that you mentioned exist. There's a global brand that in many ways started in Dubai called Blue Ground that does that as a core business model, and it is a master lease of their residential properties, and then they rent them out. But they rent them out for a very clear customer segment, mainly the people that book a month plus, right? So these are sort of like the transient population rather than visitors, rather than tourists. That's a very specific market, but they do it this way also in order to standardize the product. Their furnishings look the same, their services look the same, the crockery and cutlery and kitchen equipment and services and way to book and guest experience is sort of standardized to a large degree. And of course, this company has raised tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in order to achieve scale in this model.
Yeah, so Blue Ground, the company you were mentioning, this is basically a subleasing company.
Yes.
But they rent a lot of apartments, but instead of putting them on Airbnb and booking, they mostly get longer term tenants as well, right?
They do both.
They do both.
But the period of stay tends to average significantly higher. And obviously, what they're trying to build also is sort of that recurring business, that returning customer that actually now is interested in the consistency of the product that they.
Do you know somebody at Blue Ground?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. It's very much an industry staple. One of the operators in Dubai that has a significant market share, but it also operates in many other.
Do you think I could get somebody there on this podcast?
Well, I'll be happy to introduce you actually to the person running their business in Dubai.
Let's do that. But so then now a lot of your focus is on a new kind of company surrounding. Tell us a little bit about that. It's called Keeper.
Keeper.
You offer financial services. You're trying to eliminate checks in Dubai. What's that all about?
So you spent 10 years in the real estate business in Dubai operating, and not just operating in a linear fashion, but operating across everything around real estate, and you learn a lot and you understand a lot about pain points of the real estate space, especially pain points of property investors in particular. So having to raise a fund, buy properties, finance these properties, operate these properties, report back to owners, manage payments, manage expenses, etc. You learn and also try to understand the market and secure data and data points about the market so that you plan correctly and you execute your business correctly or your investment correctly. You learn a lot, and that was my experience. I come from a finance background prior to establishing Hometown, and if I merge what I learned from finance and what I found out and learned in the property space, a business emerged out of that, and a business that once you allow technology to implement a lot of those solutions for the pain points that you've experienced personally, you realize that this is a massive potential business that is scalable and that people actually need today in the market. And that's a little bit of background about the Keeper, how Keeper came about. It was personal pain points, but personal pain points that I believe is shared by a lot of people that bought into property, invested in property, or operate.
So what is the main function of this company? What is the main?
This is a digital property manager.
Okay.
And I can unpack that statement, of course, to you, but I may focus on a few elements of what that means. Hundreds of thousands of people own property in Dubai. Hundreds of thousands. And there's over 650,000 freehold properties in Dubai. The majority of them were acquired for investment purposes, which means that the people who put significant amount of money into them bought into them because they want to gain income out of them and they want to gain value out of these properties. And these people have a lot of requirements from somebody to take care of these properties, operate these properties, generate a rent, market these properties, generate a rent of them, collect the rent, cover expenses, and effectively offer maybe financial solutions or financing solutions for those properties. This is typically what a property investor needs. And all of these can be improved and done way better if you implement technology, if you integrate data into the equation.
So your software is like one place where people can track all these
Absolutely.
things you mentioned?
Yeah, we allow property investors to create an account on Keeper, manage their own properties on there, get data feeds about them, or pass on the management to us, where we execute actually their investment requirements, lease out the property, manage the payments, renew it, issue contracts, and also provide financial services on the back of that. At its heart, it's a property manager, but we're taking it from a very, very different angle to a conventional property manager.
Okay. So is it also for long-term rent? It's not just for short-term rent?
It is mainly for long-term rent.
So people can see like how much they rented it out here. They can charge the tenant directly through the software.
Correct.
They can see the market value of their apartment.
Correct.
The market rent of their apartment.
Correct.
There's a bunch of things in there that...
All of the information, and it's a live feed. They will get a notification if their neighbor sells their property, and we'll give them the information on how much they sold it for, what price per square foot it was sold for. So you get a sort of custom live data feed that relates to your properties. And in terms of services, they can, if a property is vacating, they can lease it out digitally. We'll market it for them on the back end, but they trigger it digitally. They can pass on their portfolio for us to manage for them and collect the rents and ensure that the tenants are addressed and carry out the maintenance jobs, etc. And for them, they can do it all in an app. They have full visibility on everything happening. They know exactly when the payments are coming through, what the status of these payments are. They can use these payments to cover another expense. They can choose to sell the property. They can look to finance the property, and all of these services are available digitally.
Okay.
They never need to see a human being. They could interact with their relationship manager via the app or directly, or they can choose to take that journey entirely digitally, including signing a contract.
So what I heard that was very interesting. So in Dubai, that's very annoying in Dubai when I'm renting apartments is I have to pay the rent in checks.
Correct.
And sometimes I have to write, if I'm paying 12 checks over there, I have to physically write 12 checks for the rent, and then I have to write a check for the agent commission and the security deposit, and it's like so many checks. I spent like 20 or 30 minutes just writing these checks.
How great is that experience?
It's terrible, but
it's not great for your landlord either. By the way.
Yeah, he has to go to the bank with a check,
deposit the checks, and if it bounces because there was a coffee stain on the check, then he needs to call you up and replace the check and get it from the bank and tear it up and get another one and deposit it at the bank.
Versus in Iceland, when I sign a contract, I get a bill in my home bank, I put it on automatic payments, and I never have to think about it again.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So you're familiar with the solution we embed in our product. We did a press release around a week ago saying, so today the company is actually 2 years old, a little bit more than 2 years old, but we have north of 3,000 freehold properties on the platform already. And we actually process rental payments for around 400 of them. So that's around 40 million dirhams of rental payments that we process on our platform. All of these are transitioning today to pure digital payment. And what does that mean? It means that for any tenant on our platform, new or existing, going forward, they will never issue a check to anybody. The only reason they have a checkbook actually as residents of Dubai today is to pay your rent. I don't think you use it for anything else.
How long do you think until we just completely eliminate these checks for rental payments?
I think it depends on operators like ourselves. So we're growing very fast. We understand that this is in demand by the tenant and by the landlord, and we are implementing it and enforcing it through our platform, and everybody loves it. So imagine an app or a website. You just go in, you sign your new tenancy contract, you upload your credit card, or you sign a direct debit mandate, and that's it. That you don't need to do anything else. And by saying fill in those things, it's digital and it's digital signature, and that's it. we start charging you the rent as per agreed timeline directly to your account or directly to your credit card. You see the status, you see the upcoming payments, you get reminders, you get to talk to us as your property manager through that platform if you have any issues. But otherwise, it's very smooth, and it is just like any other recurring digital expense, subscription expense that you have. Now, where it gets really cool is that we give you payment options also. So, and that's what we launched around, I'm going to say a little bit more than 6 months ago, which is RNPL, which is Rent Now, Pay Later. The minute that we digitize rent payments, it becomes instantly doable to change those payments.
So this is the reason why we met, actually. This
Correct.
is why I reached out to you, because I posted in my story. We don't have a lot of time left, by the way, so we're going to have to go through everything rapidly now because there's a lot of things I want to talk about still.
Sure.
But this is why I reached out to you, because you offer this. In Dubai, you usually pay rent up front. You pay the entire year up front. And sometimes you can...
Or at best in 4 payments.
Exactly.
So you're paying 3 months up front every time.
That's what I always negotiate, so I can pay 3 months up front. So that's very expensive for me to always have to put out so much rent. But you have advertisements all over the place where, or just on Google, that you can offer people so that you actually pay the rent for people, and then I would pay you monthly.
Correct.
With a little bit of extra cost. So this is why I reached out to you. I was like, let's get this going for me. But you don't do this for companies like myself.
Not yet,
you only do it for individuals.
Correct. Correct.
You can't make an exception for me?
I'll tell you why, and it will happen down the line. But we chose to start with the sort of the most common case, which is individuals renting their family homes or their own personal homes.
Why is that?
And that's because the credit assessment is straightforward. If you have a salary, if you have a UAE credit rating, then that's really the two information points that we need in order to assess the risk that we're taking on renting you the property at 12-month payments. It's how much load you have out of your salary, because this is your own home. So it should not exceed X percent of your income. And also that we know that you're in reasonable financial health. And we cannot do that for corporates or companies or businesses. It becomes, to credit assess a business is a very different process. And we have limited resources, so our launch was focused entirely on individuals, family that are renting their own personal properties to accommodate themselves.
So at some point you might, when you have more resources, you might go into companies as well, maybe a little of a
we
higher
have the requirement
cost.
Already. Yes, not necessarily at a higher cost to the tenant, but it requires development from our side. Because we've developed for assessing the credit risk of individuals. To assess the credit risk of companies, you're looking at financial statements, balance sheets, business models, history, etc., which requires a very different process and different resources to build for.
Last thing I want to talk about is you're obviously a very busy man. Like, you've got back-to-back meetings. Hard to get a hold of you, you know.
It's tough starting a business.
How do you manage your time? Do you have an assistant that puts in your calendar? Do you have that?
So in this day and age, a lot of these things are electronic. And we, instead of having, an assistant per se, I have a lot of tools. And I adopt these tools to manage my time in order to track and, my task lists and my deliverables during the day and how to allocate. But even with those, it's still tough. You're in flux a lot. I mean, in the first couple of years of managing a high growth business, a technology business, and an operating business, you need to be flexible also with your time and reprioritize very quickly. And for that, I think what I try to do is surround myself with also a lot of efficient people. And people that sort of will push me back in the right direction if I stray a little bit or get too busy in one direction or the other. And it's always been, for me, recognized is make sure you're surrounded by people that are walking in the same direction, and they'll keep you walking in the same direction, right? If they're all heading that way, you can't head in any different way, and you have to keep pace with them. So I think that's what keeps me on the on the path.
That's a good point. One more thing, if somebody's thinking about doing an Airbnb business in Dubai, whether that's revenue share or subleasing, what recommendations would you give to them?
Don't do it is the first one. And that's what they say generally when you're want to start a business, is don't do it.
Yeah.
When you start off that way, it at least makes you take a breather and consider how much of a commitment you're going to make this a success. You want to do this as a side business, do it on a couple of properties, see how it works for you. That's fine, I guess, but you still have to do it the right way, right? Yeah. You have to license the property. There is a process to license these properties in order to operate them correctly. There's taxes for you to be paid. There's expenses that you're going to have to incur upfront. So you're going to have to put some money aside in order to get that thing started. If you're planning or considering this as a business, raise money first, right? Don't do this with your own savings necessarily, because savings would not allow you to scale this into a sizable business. So you're going to get at some point stuck in between. I don't have enough money to invest in resources and technology to make this a real business, but I'm so far in that it takes up all my time. So be careful. Almost everybody is stuck in that in between today.
Yeah, definitely. And for people that like have not done Airbnb before, I think you always have to find a way to develop your Airbnb skills first. Yes. You have to either, co-host for another person or work for a company like yours where you can develop your Airbnb skills. Or if you just want to dive in, just take one property and just practice your Airbnb skills and practice getting good at everything. Like, just start slow.
It's a hospitality business. Exactly. Remember that first and foremost. People spend years learning hospitality, learning hotel management, learning guest expectations and guest management and so on. And you could do a phenomenal job that you'll never be able to replicate at scale, because you will not be there if you have 20 properties every time, right? So yes, hone it on that. Establish standards that are the standards that you want for yourself, for your properties, that you expect your guests to go through, and work on enforcing those consistently over the years at scale.
Absolutely. Well, it's been a pleasure. Anywhere you want people to, anything you want people to check out, maybe a keeper, or if people want you to manage their Airbnb apartment, where should they go?
Well, they can go to Keeper. Keeper is sort of a consolidated platform, so we actually offer all the services on there. And for short-term rentals, we work with licensed operators, right? We offer an option for licensed operators to manage those properties, but we give the visibility back to the owner. The app is on the App Store. It's called Keyper, Keeper, or Keeper Investor. You download the app, you upload your property. It's data integrated, which means we will recognize your property immediately. We'll verify your account, and then you can do whatever you want. You want to put it on short-term rentals, we'll take it for you. You want to just get information feed on it, that continues to be the case. You want to rent it out, you have a path there. You want to sell the property, there's a path there. Or you just want to track it, right? Yeah. That is, you want to watch and see when income comes in and when certain tasks are needed. That it also does that for you.
That's awesome. Keeper on the App Store.
Yes.
Check that out. Thank you so much for coming.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.